This morning we are going to hear from Loran, Steinlage, and Chris Teachout about cover crops 201, some advances in cover crops that these two gentlemen have been trying on their farms.
Good morning. I'm Loran Steinlage, as he said. Chris Teachout is going to be up here shortly, but I'm going to apologize. I might jump around here a little bit because we kind of lopped off the front part of my presentation to squeeze it in. We're going to ask me to come down to speak on the interseeding I've been doing, but to really explain what I'm doing, I need to show you kind of what's built up to this point. I've studied a lot of history and I study other farms in different regions. So, but we're going to start off with this. How many of you can figure out what's wrong with this picture?
Oh, you're moving and driving and talking.
I know. I think, it's when two independent farmers find themselves in a situation in a foreign country, have to figure things out. If you look at this, we're on the wrong side of the road. Loran's driving, and I'm trying to navigate. So when we come together, we can really help solve some problems.
From that day on, he became Chris. Chris. 6 days later, we had it mastered. We figured out we actually had GPS in the car. Who would have thunk? But a lot of what drives me right now is I want to be able to start sinking carbon back in the soil. And getting ready for this winter, I started really researching how far, a lot of people ask how long we've been at this. I found this old picture from 2006. We've been having carbon streaking down in the soil. We were paying attention 10 years ago. Fast forward to 2016, that was my field day this summer. Chris had the luxury of working in the root pit with Dr. Joe Clapperton. We had carbon streaking, 4.5 feet? And I'm not afraid to put my soil on the test. I mean, if anybody, I get criticized because I don't like doing the testing myself, but if anybody else wants to do testing, come on up. I mean, I call this the old Jesus test some days when, everybody tells you you're doing good, put your soil on there and let's find out. I'm pleased to admit we did pretty good on there. And then probably the proudest moment I have is this fall, my test field, we found a soil ped that we took in and we had it analyzed for the water stable soil aggregate level. And normal corn on corn is, I hit the wrong one, is 78, or normal corn, continuous corn is in the 35 to 45% range. That PED is up in the 78% range, which is on par with 5-year restored native prairie. That everybody thinks this ped of soil looks like it's wet, but the neatest thing I saw was right here. It was actually bubbling, and it was about 5 days after a rain event we had this summer. But the ground was just like it was bubbling. And but when you really start studying that, there's a 78% level. Down here is what I'm starting to pay attention. I want to start finding out where we're at on the organic carbon level. That's going to be where we're going this year with testing, I hope. And but one of the other tests we've been running this summer is we started doing tile nitrate monitoring. We were involved in a study the last 3-4 years, but this is this year's results. A few people told me I probably shouldn't show this because we do have some high levels down here. But the context of the whole test was we were very dry all summer. This was the first rain we had in 3 months and our tile line started running. So we went and took a well sample. My well, this is all done with the Soil Scan 360. My well sample was 6.2 parts per million. The shocker to me was the spring coming out of the isolated woods was 19 parts per million. And then I've got a main outlet that drains half of my field and half of a neighbor's field. That was in the 25 parts per million range. Not overly proud of that. I'm trying to figure out how much we affected it, because then in that same field, we have isolated area where it's just my cover crop field, and we're down to 13 parts per million just out of the same field that main comes out of. So that we do have, I'm going to challenge everybody here today. We do have Des Moines watershed people representing right out here. What I would like everybody in here to do as they leave today, stop out there and tell them a little story of what you are doing on a proactive basis on your farm. That's the mission I've accepted. I'm going to start telling people what we're doing to try to help avoid more lawsuits. In a roundabout way, everything I've been working on the last 5 years has brought me to this point, and that's what I'm going to try to touch on today. We've been dealing with multi-species mix, precision covers, and the interseed cover crop, and now I'm starting to delve into relay companion cropping. So with that, I was working on everything. Everything was kind of heading down the road, and but first I better show you where I'm at in Iowa, and then I'm going to show you where Chris is at. I've always told everybody, Iowa's pretty diverse. I'm clear up here, and Chris is clear down here in this corner of Iowa. So pretty much what I'm going to show you, what he's going to show you, we got Iowa covered pretty well, I hope, but hopefully you can pick up bits and pieces of what both of us are doing. And another neat feature where I'm at is I finally figured out what the natural region where we're located. I've always heard of the name, but Paha Ridges, I'm a mile south and a mile west of the driftless area, right in northeast Iowa, and that is Lowe's Hills in northeast Iowa. But this is the path I was heading down. I almost felt like I was trying to reinvent the wheel. That was last spring planting corn in northeast Iowa. And there's what it looked like after planting. And then there is what after burn down. But this is the part that I'm amazed at. This is what it looked like in the spring. Right there's what it looked like in the fall. When you want to talk about biological active soils, I think we're getting pretty close. And as that summer, as I was working on that, had that aha moment, and was trying to figure out how to combine everything, simplify things, eliminate equipment, and these are all the different directions I was kind of working on, trying to meld everything together, and we're in Iowa, so got to have the obligatory video there, but I kept going back to this picture. Back in the early 1900s, 1930s, our grandpas were doing this stuff. So, it's just recycling, reach back, trying to tie old technology into what's available today. So, I had a drill that I rebuilt that summer. We switched it around into the twin row configuration for interseeding. But what it did for me is it opened up the avenue for precision covers. And there's a whole bunch of slides here. I'm going to zip through pretty quick, so you might want to, we're roughly in the same spot of the field all the way through to spring. There's when I'm planting. My biggest issue is I'm trying to gain more carbon, more residue on the soil, because we're going to burn it up. And there's a week after planting. I went back to, we're using a row band on the planter now I put a residual on the row to help weed control so I can allow the covers in between the row to grow a little longer. And there's emergence. That's when I finally terminated. You're going to see later a few of my future plans, what I'm hoping to do with that, but we'll kind of keep the sequence going. And this is when we started side dressing. We're side dressing urea, and then hopefully next year we're going to have it lined up. We're going to blow covers and urea at the same time, but this year we were doing some proof of concept build, so we had to make 2 passes on the majority of it. But very simple setup. And this is a week after interseeding. I'll just kind of keep going through here. Hopefully, feel free to write down some questions, ask us later. We've been at this, I think this is going to be my 9th season. And the biggest thing is my test field, we've been doing it on there continuously. We've been planting green. That's where that pet of soil came from. I'm averaging $15 an acre of seed, and that field is 15 bushel an acre ahead of any other field I farm on our proven average. But that's what that field looked like this year after harvest. There was about 2 weeks later. Everybody asks what mixes I use. I focus mainly on legumes and brassicas when we're going corn on corn. On beans, we're just starting to get some of that figured out. If we're going to beans, I've pulled most of the broadleaves out, but due to yield gains, we keep some in there. I'll control burn them later. Beans, or corn going to beans, we're just starting to play there. We've got the first successful interseed this year, so hopefully we're going field scale for next year. But there's that pet of soil again. Like I said, I'm a little proud of that, but that's been planted green for at least 5 years. This is some of the test data that we have been privy to. This is out of my field. Everybody says you need to plow the dirt to warm it up. This is our cover crop test versus no cover crop. We're warmer in the spring, and then once we hit canopy, we're actually cooler, and then in the fall, we're warmer again. And this is the tool that I'm playing with for next year. I just bought one of these. It's a FLIR camera. This was after the first snow this winter. Went out there the next morning. We had, I think it was a foot of snow. And the next morning you could see that field was radiating heat. And just proof that it does work. That's the radiant floor in our house. And if anybody want to guess what the little by the window is? That's our coffee pot. Neat technology, but all that started combining, and this year I was afforded the chance to build this rig, which has kind of fed my need. I'm starting to really look hard into companion cropping because I want to get to the point where my cover crops are paying their way. I mean, basically I'm looking at pushing to the point where our cover crop is going to become a cash crop. And here's some of the pluses and minuses I foresee in this management system. But probably the key is keeping a living root and biologically active soil. And then some of the negatives, we're not too far off a lot of the negatives. I mean, it's pluses can be minuses. Probably the biggest thing I want to stress is Mother Nature. It don't matter how good your plan is. She can throw a monkey wrench at you once in a while. And this came out of this year. You know, we've had a few mistakes in the past. This was our train wreck this year. We'd had some relay wheat in that. We were trying to go on the cheap on a bunch of it, and a lot of the different management changes on that field burned us pretty hard, but we learned from it. You know, now we know what not to do. But the other main thing I want to address on cover crops in that, make sure your RMA and USDA people are up to speed. A lot of your insurance agents will say you can't do some of this. I've been working with them for at least 5 years. We have it documented, the yield gains in that. And if you can get a hold of this, if you're going to start playing this route, it said, you know, basically you can do what you know, as long as it's in a good farming practice, you're clear to go. And here's a few more of our disasters early on in interseeding. Is you need to understand your chemical programs. I mean, the neat part is that center top one, I thought that was a failure. I was about ready to give up on interseeding on that one, but the next spring, all of a sudden, the clover was just phenomenal. So apparently, Callisto and clover can survive. I don't know if I want to keep trying to find the guidelines for it. But this is going to switch us over, and now we're focused on relay cropping. And basically, a lot of this is going to look the same as the precision covers until, other than the seeding rate and stuff like that. I wish I had my normal one. I'd show you the video of when we're drilling soybeans in here that day. And you can just follow through here. There's harvest. You can see the beans are there, nice. We had a lot of, it's hard to tell you bushels and stuff like that because we did have a lot of issues. You know, I was almost going to cancel my part of the deal because we had frost. Whoever thought cereal rye would freeze out in March. But we did prune it down pretty good. Where we weren't frost affected, we had 40 bushel cereal rye and 40 bushel beans. So I know a friend of mine's doing a lot better at that, but I'm I'm about 9 years behind him. And we're going to continue through the sequence of the relay. There's the cereal rye the day we combined it. I'm too cheap to put it in a bin, so we put it right in the totes, and I put fans in it. All that with the new drill I built there, Montauk seed box, all that went right through the drill without running through a grain cleaner. And there was my field day last summer there, kind of proud, because if you know who's all standing there, there's some pretty good folks right there. When you talk about peer groups, that's a pretty good one. But the thing I noticed with the relay beans into cereal rye and that, we did not have near the platiness or the lack of mycorrhizal fungi in the beans. We had very good nodulation. And the biggest thing I can foresee, we need to get the tram lines and that figured out a little better. But there's what our soil looked like. And now my favorite part of the show is when we talk iron. So this is the build. This is kind of the equipment side that I normally focus on. But that's how simple you can start with cover crops. I mean, this is supposed to be 201, so I hope we're past that stage, most of us. But yeah, that was the year I was about ready to give up. I had to hurry up and slam that together because, hey, we seen some success. So I had parts and pieces laying in the shop. Just hurry up and threw that together, and then we just kept building. There's that drill I took from a 3-point pulled behind drill. We made it fully mounted just for the interseeding. But as you keep going, you can figure out that you can make it diverse and make it work. And that opened us up to the doors. And last winter, I was telling everybody I had this idea of what I wanted to build. And that's kind of where we started. It's the first time we got to play with CAD drawings. And all new parts and pieces for once. That kind of entertains a crazy guy like me. So, but these are Dawn Duo Seed row units. They customized them pretty good to what I wanted in a row unit. And I don't know if you can buy that row unit today, but they're working pretty good. To get the soybeans in the ground last spring, we had to hurry up and throw an old Henniker box on just to meter the beans, because I think we're going to have it figured out how to seed beans with the Montauk here by spring, but sometimes you got to make things work. And then there's the day we put the Montauk box on. And through that one, a lot of people ask me how we're doing the row band on the planter. So I just fabbed up some brackets, and we made, with a CCS planter, you don't have the frame and all that to mount off of anymore. And this is what intrigues me for the future. I'm going to try to get away from doing a chemical burn down on the cereal rye and standing corn. What you see right there is we'll be roll crimping, and then we'll plant it, and then got to get the right picture here. But right at about the time I'd normally be doing a burn down is when we're going to go through and roll crimp it. We'll probably apply some urea at that time. And the whole goal is, instead of chemically terminating the rye, we're going to just rely on that spray band for our total weed control program. And when I mentioned the controlled burn down before, the difference between them two fields is 50 bushel an acre on an interseed program. The only difference is we have broadleaves and brassicas versus straight grasses. And so pretty much that's kind of me it for now. If Chris wants to take over.
Yeah, my name is Chris Teachout. I'm from Southwest Iowa. Otherwise, professors always told me, I came from Lapland. And Lapland is, he said, where Missouri kind of laps over into Iowa. So we're in the rolling hills down there, a lot of B, C, and D slopes. Anyway, these are some of my experiences. History of doing cover crops go clear back to the 80s. We were doing aerial seeded rye in the 80s, and it wasn't cover crop. It was just we wanted a winter forage in our cornfields for stock cows when we used to have the livestock. But anyway, when I started hearing about cover crops, the light went off. It's like I was doing this, way back then, and over a progression of time kind of got away from it. Anyway, so good cover crops, taking care of your soil, produce some really good crops. Anyway, here's my biggest angst. I kind of put this chart together. It kind of shows the depth of our topsoil going back to the year 1850 to the year 2000. And where I get this is true data, but where it's at is along Interstate 80, eastbound, about mile marker 85. There's a Wallace Foundation themed rest stop there. And out in front, they have these soil columns. They're concrete columns that represent what the soil has done over time. And in there, there's all these other conservation practices that are displayed, of contour farming, no-till, and terracing, all the good things. But here, out in front, is kind of the legacy of what we've done to our topsoil, to our natural resource. So, if we extrapolate this on out, to the year 2050 or beyond, we're running out of our good carbon, our topsoil. And about that same time, domestically, one presenter said that we would be running out of our domestic phosphorus. So then we'd have to import all of that. So this is a big thing that I would like to see this thing turn around, at least stabilize, and let's head in a different direction. Anyway, cover crops kind of 101 to me is cereal rye ahead of soybeans. Going ahead and getting it in your corn stalks. And a lot of times, some people call it, kind of planting dirty. Well, this I think is a real cool picture, Kind of reminds me of the landscape artists, how when they're mowing, they sweep the grass back and forth and leave that pattern. After I got done with that, it just is really beautiful. And that's a cereal rye in some corn stalks. And then that, we planted into real small rye. Then at progressions, we plant into some bigger rye, planting it green. And this is where planting soybeans into the rye. And then when you really get crazy, then we go into some, 5-foot tall rye. And again, when we've terminated that rye, it still has that beautiful pattern on there. The ground is really protected. And a couple things. We have this ground all armored up, and those are 30-inch row beans. It's a 10-year-old public variety. They didn't quite make 70 bushel, but oh well, they made 69 point something. So, pretty good. And it's what you can do. And I think it's Cover Crop 101. Anybody can do this and have real good success with that. Here, I went out into that field, and we had a check strip that we didn't have rye and then where we had rye. And this was about the last week of June. We'd had about 10 days of some real, had that 90, 95 degree weather. It looked like we were going to go into a big dry spell. So we had about 10 days, and I went out there. This is late in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and I want to see the temperatures. The small sensor is a 4-inch depth, and this laser thermometer is measuring the surface temperature. So I just kind of pulled back that rye a little bit. So we've had this tremendous heat, and this is in the middle of the rows. So at 4-inch depth, we're at 79 degrees. Well, biological activity stops and ceases at 85 degrees. So we've still got biological activity going there. And the surface temperature is 90 degrees. So the next picture, I was just really floored with this. If we look here, this is right in that same field. We had no rye cover. We have really good biological activity in there. So the corn stalks and stuff in the middle row
are really been decomposed and eaten up. But at the 4-inch level, we're at 93 degrees. So we've shut down biology there. And if you look at the laser thermometer, what the surface temperature, it's 148 degrees. You know, so if this would continue, we're just going to really cook those soybeans. Then here's another thing. When we have the soil really armored, we get so much better infiltration. Now our rainfall events, instead of 1-2 inch, you know, we're getting these 3-4 inch rainfall events in short time period. So now we can have a lot better water infiltration, but the water that we do have running off there, it kind of looks like a Colorado stream. And then right next door, you know, when I see some long-term no-till fields, and with these heavy rainfall events, we're getting the chocolate milk coming off. One of the things when we get into cover crops, when we first jump in, we go, oh, we're going to plant some cereal rye. Well, there's a big difference in varieties, so we need to get down, you know, what you want that variety to do. And this, I've kind of drawn this line here between two varieties. The one in the lower portion here is a Northern VNS. These were all terminated about a week before this, and they've already been planted into. The tall is a Southern rye, it's an Elbon rye. So we have, and this is in the first part of May. So we've got a lot bigger cover if that's what you want. And going ahead of soybeans, I like a lot of depth of the rye. Over here, you know, if you're planting something and if you have colder prone soils, maybe you want some sunlight getting down into that. So that's how you kind of manage, you know, and you need to select, you know, what rye. And it goes to other different types of cover crops to really look into it. And here we're supposed to kind of, Ray Archuleta always says, you know, to mimic nature. There's a lot going in here. You know, of course, one of my favorite things, you know, is picking mushrooms in the spring. But anyway, when you look at this, all the different shades of green here, and a lot of there's diversity there. There's the fungi, which is the mushroom, but the fungal threads underneath that soil are breaking down. They're decomposing that and recycling those nutrients. Because none of this was ever fertilized. You know, this is just a edge of inside of a timber. But anyway, when we look at that, then look at this picture here, kind of go back and forth. You know, very similar, the different tones of green there. And here what we're doing, a lot of times if you can't put the cereal rye on, or don't get it all on, well, when I first started to go to cover crop meetings, you know, they preached diversity and getting the crops out there. Well, you go to all the winter meetings, get all excited, then come spring, oh, we got to just plant a regular crop and I got to wait till fall to put in something in a corn-soybean rotation. So we have the limitations of that. And in the fall, we're always constrained by the narrowing of our day length and the growing time, and then all of a sudden freeze and you're done. Well, why not? This was kind of an experiment. We did it on both corn and soybeans, but it really works well on soybeans. Put in a diverse cover crop as soon as you can, like if during oat planting time. And this was like oats, barley. It's got some grazer radish. It's got a little clover. It was about a 12-way blend. And we had some mustards, flax, phacelia. We had that mix in there. And we're trying to stimulate the biology of the soil, get that train going. Because we all know, you know, soybeans are very biological with rhizobium nodules on them. So when we plant them, we're waiting for that biology to take place. Well, why not get the train going ahead of time? And one thing we noticed with this too, and this was only growing for 35, 40 days. When we terminated this, we had some areas that we'd left kind of open, or some skips, the operator skips. Those are our check plots. But anyway, You know, that's what I always said. Oh, okay, good job. You left me a strip, you know, and stuff. No problem. But anyway, when the sprayer came and terminated this, it was, this is a few years ago, and the sprayer tracks where it went across this, and I took the penetrometer and measured the ground resistance in those sprayer tracks where we had this spring cover and where we didn't. Where we didn't have this and the sprayer went across that bare ground, you know, it compacted down and we were over 300 PSI. So we're in the red zone on that. Where I went over to this and measured that sprayer track, we're in the you know, upper green part of it, really low resistance. And it made like a real nice mattress. You know, it just kind of cushed down. And you could see that ground, if you're running right alongside that ground would flex back up. So it gives it a little cushion so you can get out there a little earlier and take care of it. Anyway, you can control the diversity. You know, with your seed supplier and stuff, when you're doing this, you can be very creative on your mixes. I think this was the mix we had there. And a lot of people go, well, you know, when you start looking at a mix like that, you know, and with today's economy of row crop, you know, maybe a little more expensive, so maybe I don't want to do that. Well, you can control that too. Let's see, you can control the cost. Let's throw in some grasses and just a few broadleafs and stuff. We can bring that cost, you know, way down to where it's very reasonable. And on the first one, we're doing a total mix of about 40, 45 pounds. And this one too, I think about 40 pounds. And we like barley and oats because if you have like a straight early oat crop, say it gets up to about 1.5 feet and you terminate it, those oats can go totally flat and seal off your ground. So let's throw in 20, maybe 30% barley. It has more lignin early on to, well, it will hold that oat crop up when you terminate it, so it won't totally seal your ground over. We'll go back here. Here's a diverse mix that I did after my cereal rye. When we were raising our own cereal rye, then we come in, after that's harvested in early July, we go ahead and harvest at a moisture of around 17%, put it in the bin and aerate it. Anyway, we go in there and put in a diverse mix. So here we've got, you know, buckwheat, we've some hemp, there's some radishes, and it's about a 15-away mix that we're just improving the soil health and resting it. Now, if I had livestock back again, this would be great for mob grazing. I could really advance the biology of this. Anyway, here's what it kind of looks like. The far field over there is some terminated rye. That was kind of the medium rye I was planting through in that one picture. So it's all terminated, has that nice cover to it. This is the spring seeded mix here in the corn stalks, and it's already been 15-inch rows drilled into that. And everybody goes, well, why are you spending the money? Why are you doing that? This is the big reason right here. You know, these roots here, that's what we've gained in the short time. I mean, the mass and the biology here, you start to see the soil hanging on there. It's getting glomalin, and the bacteria is really starting on that. So we've added carbon back to our soil. So we're starting to regenerate our soil. And this is all in 30, 40 days ahead of soybeans. This chart, I think everybody should really study it and analyze it and try to figure this thing out. Basically, it's a periodic table of cover crops. And on one side is the grasses, the cool season grasses, then the warm season grasses, and the legumes and the broadleafs in the middle. So depending on what crop that you're playing with, you need to kind of figure this out. Because what we're raising in a corn soybean rotation are two warm season crops, a warm season legume, a warm season grass. So then the cereal rye as a cool season comes into play there. But when we start to layer these and really advance cover crops, and that's what I'm doing, I'm starting to overlap at the different seasons so I have something growing with the crop, then also during the winter or in the spring. So I'll kind of, and I always thought, okay, with the interseeding, my question is, what can we plant in corn during the growing season? A few years ago, I went on this mission to try to find out what would work. We had about 4 different chemical regimes, and I took about 20 different species, and we just broadcast them out in the corn at V4. One of the first years I did it later at V6, V7, and we had, I was putting a bunch of clovers and some buckwheat out there. Well, we had a really good establishment, but then the shade took over, and I was excited because that fall I was going to combine and have this beautiful carpet of clover in there. Had nothing. We did have a lot of multi-story cover crop, because some of that, at that late, some of the seeds got caught in the whorls, the side leaves, so we had sprouts coming out the side of the corn on different layers and stuff like that. But anyway, they didn't survive because we were too late. The light shadowed us out. But one of the things that really stood out was cowpeas. They really worked, and I loved the understory. So here's my kind of venture then into interplanting. And here you can see a rows of cowpeas in the cornfield. And if you look at the side of the picture here, you see some residue, some of the rye residue. So we had rye before this. Excuse me. And then we're coming back in at V4 and planting. And all we did, we took an old planter and I offset some wheels and just kind of offset the hitch so we could, plant. And so this experiment has been going on for about 3 years. We've expanded the acres that we're trying it on and really seeing, what results we get. And like Loran showed the picture, these implements, this is a horse drill, and this is a 135 years old technology. It's like we're just, kind of relearning this. It was there. They went out there at lay-by at second cultivation. Of course, they had 40-inch corn rows. They'd pull this with a horse, right down between the rows and interplant. So technology's been there. And this film, or this slide shows, we've done this before. Can anybody guess what year this is? Any guesses? This is 1910. 1910. And those are cowpeas in the corn. Now, this slide, we evaluated this year. We did about 50 varieties of cowpeas, and there's 3 main ones that we can commercially get. But of the 50, I was picking up a bunch of heirloom seeds and just started out with a little push planter and trying to figure out which ones will really work, because there's different maturities all the way from 50-day up to 110-day cowpeas. There's vine type, there's bush type, there's semi-vine types. So we're trying to figure out, before we really get this idea out there, what are the right ones to do. A lot of the old heritage ones just really didn't like that understory. There are a lot of beautiful different beans. They're all different types of colors. But anyway, on this picture here, and a lot of people always ask, going through there, it kind of looks like silage. These are some very extreme cowpeas. These are ones maybe you do not want to plant, depending on the purpose. But some of these are the black seeded ones. They are very aggressive. I was showing another guy this. He had the aha moment that he's always wanted to graze corn. So we kind of came up with the idea, and then he also wanted to do the Three Sisters, throw in some squash in there. I says, well, they need a little more sunlight. So we came up with the idea. He saw this, and he would like to use that black seeded cowpea because it's very aggressive. It's kind of in these two rows right here. It's very aggressive, goes clear up to the top. But we said, well, if you're going to graze it, put the grazing corn, put the cowpeas in there, skip one of these rows, put some of your brassicas, turnips, and your squash in that row, get a little sunlight down in there. Then he can run the four-wheeler up and down that blank row that's going to have low stature crops. Put his, that way he can strip graze this, if he was going to, do grazing on corn. So different ideas and stuff. Over here to the right-hand side, these rows, these have cowpeas in them, but they're more a lower prostrate one. And see, late in the season, you'll get some of the vines vine up through here. And I had no problem going through this with the combine. Now at frost, these will totally freeze out. But anyway, this was several years ago. This was a broadcast application of them. You don't get near the stand, but in here, we've got some flax, and I know there's some forage collards, and they almost made it through the season, but then kind of gave up on me. Because down in southwest Iowa, our corn gets really extremely tall, so we have a lot of shading, a lot of leaf area. One thing to look at this, though, is all these little clumps here, and here, and here. All my residue from the years before are being gathered up. The earthworms are very active, and they make these little castles, and they bring all that residue. So late in the season, even on some of my corn on corn, I have residue that's just totally disappeared. So I need something in between there to keep that canopy cooler during the summer. It'll, it's like the rye in the soybeans. It's going to keep it cooler, keep your moisture there, and keep the biological activity going through the season. Here's the, this is a variety that I like. It's iron and clay, and it stays kind of low and prostrate. It'll send a few vines up there, but it really works. That's the one right now I would recommend. We're looking at some other ones, some Texas creams, and they're a bush type, but we haven't fully evaluated those. But this is, if you're going to do some interplanting, an iron and clays, and they're very readily available. They would work. This is kind of some of the strips and after harvest. And so if you're grazing corn stalks, you have a lot of residue and the protein out there. A couple years ago, Colton and I, we took some samples of above ground samples of some of the cowpeas. It was before this year that we had extreme growth. But we gathered up the residue of the cowpeas was about 9 pounds of nitrogen. But this year, we probably got about 4 times the amount of growth on top. So here's just another look at that. This is a couple years ago. That was broadcast. Anyway, here's another thing. This is from a 1910 book. Cowpeas not only increase the fertility, but decrease blowing by adding humus to the soil. This is 1910. And it says, leave a cover crop of pea vines on the land through the winter, and when the spring comes, you may have some of your neighbor's soil, but he will have very little, if any, of yours. This is 1910. So here's a cowpea, the nodulation that takes place. What I like is the fungal threads, and I can't prove this yet, but I think we're getting some late season nitrogen with a mycorrhizae, sharing that with the corn plant, but they nodulate like crazy. Here we have 2 roots. One is from really biological soil, and the other is just from a basic custom farm that I farmed that just has had chemical fertilizers, no cover crops on it. Here again, this is some of my soil, what it looks like. There's a lot of things going on here. The fungal threads, we have earthworm castings, and the decomposition, the nutrient cycling is very quick. So anyway, soil health testing. We have laboratory testing, which is very expensive. We have the Haney soil test. We have the Slavita respiration test, the SYU, and the TBI. Here is the Slavita test. It's measuring the respiration of the bacteria, coming out of the soil. It can be done in lab or field tests. Here is the Haney soil test. It's expensive, and so it tells you a lot, but I hear a lot that the interpretation of this is a big thing. And then here is something, Loran, I always hear, farmers go and have these field days. They're kind of hidden back in the cornfield in the waterways and stuff like that. And to me, looking at this, it kind of looks like farmers observing a little lingerie party.
We get a little reckless.
So what's going on? I know this is on your property, so.
3 years ago, some of my Canadian friends, I think it was, developed what they call Soil Your Undies program. The NRCS has always had the cotton test, but they were trying to figure out an innovative way to get people's attention. So the story goes, one of the gals in the group went to the store to get the cheapest cotton she could. Well, she was going down the aisles, and men's cotton underwear was the cheapest way they could do it. So they developed the protocol, and basically all you do is you go out in your field, pick each of your rotation systems. I always just stick my shovel in, slice, get it about 2 inches deep, jam the underwear under there, forget about it for I do 6 weeks, but most people are doing it 8 weeks. The biggest problem I foresee is a lot of people think this is a competition between people. You can't compare to other people, you have to compare to your own. I've learned I got to do 6 weeks or mine's going to be right down to waistband on most of my fields. That's just how active my soil is. But if you're looking for more information on it, just go on Google #SoilYourUndies.
Okay, so in this simple test, you're saying that all I need is a shovel and my own underwear, right?
Preferably new clean ones.
Oh, well, here, let me. You mean these? Okay, that's all I need, very simple. Okay.
My wife does not like doing laundry anymore.
Okay, yeah. Good to hear. Anyway, moving forward, I'm going to introduce you to something a little more refined. This is fun, but we can't get
You can tell the difference here. I'm a little rough around the edges.
Yeah. Anyway, the T-bag index was introduced, I think in can't remember the date exactly, but it was developed in the Netherlands. And they're trying to come up with a way to figure out, microbial action in our soil, and by using T-bags. And so, I'd just like to invite you, let's get a little more refined here, and, let's offer you a cup of tea, and stuff. And so, yeah. So what they're doing is they're taking tea bags here. I'll get to it. And they're the pyramid type tea bags, and they're taking the Lipton, the red tea, and then the green tea. Because the difference here is the carbon-nitrogen ratio. This is like a really hard, heavy carbon crop, corn stalks, mature rye. The green is like alfalfa or clover and stuff that degrades rapidly. And so over time, and this is a cheap test, and basically what you do, you'll bury these in the ground, or a series of several of them, and then we dig them up and dry them out, weigh them, and then we come up with a scale. And Marshall McDaniel is coming up, from Iowa State, and working with PFI. They're going to have a protocol out pretty soon, so it's not there yet. But anyway, going to have this protocol to where anybody can do it, and they want to have the tea bags sent back to the lab. They're going to have some kits put together to do this. But it's something later on. Around the world this is going on, so we can have a testing and comparing soils around the world with a simple test that we can do. And basically what it does, it takes the red tea compared to the green tea and how fast they decompose. And so over time, the difference between that and the closer to 1 in this formula, that's more healthy soil that you have. So it's going to be a simple test of just burying these instead of burying our underwear. And then waiting the time, and then maybe over time, if we bury like 4 or 5 of these, pull those out over time, certain time increments, send them in, they'll dry them, weigh them, but eventually, I mean, you can do this yourself. You'd have to have a gram scale and dry these in the oven, not overburn them and stuff like that. So anyway, thank you, and you never know what you'll find in your field. You know, get out and observe. This little pheasant we found in our field, you know, running around last fall, you know, that's pretty neat. So that's it for me.
Open up for questions.
Do you bury those? Like tea bags?
How deep do you bury the
Okay. How, it's probably in the first, you know, 3-4 inches.
Okay.
And just kind of like the underwear, you know, just kind of lifting this up and putting those under there, leaving the tag out and then marking them where you doing it. Any other questions? Yes?
Can you flip to your chart of the soil, topsoil decrease?
Oh, the very first there?
When do you plant the peas in the second trip?
The cowpeas, they're going in at, when am I planting the cowpeas? They're planting in at about V4. So your question on this?
My question is, from 1850 to 1950, there's obvious reasons for the lack of, well, for one, the lack of knowledge in soil conservation for the decrease in topsoil.
Yep.
But after the Dust Bowl and things like that, we came to know like contour farming and things. It exponentially decreased instead of being at such a steep decline.
Correct.
Do you suppose with our added technology, even as far back as 2000 to now, that there would be another exponential decrease in the loss of topsoil?
Yes, I agree with you. He's talking about the, oop, did the wrong one.
It's the bottom one in it.
Okay. About the slope of the line, you know, going down to here, you know, back then it was, you know, plowing up the prairies and really burning up our carbon.
Getting rid of the native grasses. And
Yep, and that's what that time period was. From here, then conservation started, so we changed the slope of that. Then when we get to here,
But from 2000, you followed the same plane.
I did that because, yeah, this could be changed somewhat. And have we stabilized that? But what is the percentage of cover crops and all that? Not that much, you know. And there has been a lot of change, but there's still a lot of areas that are tilling. And I've noticed some areas gone back to tillage. So,
But even with tillage, wouldn't soil erosion prevention like tile terrace basins and buffer strips, waterways and all that, wouldn't that still decrease the amount of topsoil loss?
yes, it will, but we're still, we aren't building our soil back up.
Right.
And so, yeah, maybe we've slowed this down to the bottom of the curve. Maybe we are tapering, but I still feel that it's going down. That's just my opinion, you know, from what I see out there.
My question basically was, is that depiction of the chart an accurate, or is that?
That's my assumption. If we continue doing what we haven't, you know, just the basics, if we don't go to a 202 or really advance and really understand what we're doing, rebuilding the soil, if we don't go there, this is a slope. I'm hoping that it will be a lot different slope. Yes,
What's your rate of cowpeas per acre?
about 9-10 pounds.
And then what
Okay.
planter-
What he asked what the rate of cowpeas were, and it's a 9-10 pounds, so
Yeah.
very economical.
what kind of planter are you using?
It's an old plate type planter. Just kind of, you know, just whatever I had. You know, I'm not advanced and, you know, have that equipment like Loran has, but there's things you can use. You can use a drill and take out some row units and straddle the corn rows. A 3-point mounted drill would work. I mean, you can figure out, we're very innovative and stuff, so. Any questions for Colton?
Can you both talk about the herbicide chemistry that you're using to intercrop?
Okay, the question was, what herbicide treatments are we using?
I'm back down to just a simple row band on the row, and then right the day before I interseed, then I'll do a broad-based burn with no residual. So, I mean, we're pretty simple. You know, I was doing like a 2-pass with atrazine and dicambia up front. Now with the residual right on the row, the only place I really have weeds is right on the row where I disturb the soil. So.
Yeah, and what we're doing for herbicide, we're still tweaking it, but the biggest thing, cowpeas are very similar to soybeans. So there's a lot of herbicides out there. I don't want to promote any, but there's some that will work both ways. And soybeans will withstand up to a pound of atrazine. So even putting the early pre's on with the early burn down, we can do that. And then like if you've got Roundup corn, you can come up and clean it up at the V4 and plant at that same time. So that's one system.
Where's your percent water-soluble calcium before and after either one of you? And what's your Haney score for soil health assessment?
Okay, he's asking what the Haney soil test score and then also soluble calcium.
No, carbon, excuse me.
Soluble carbon. I'd have to look back on that. Do you know?
I don't focus on the testing that much, I'll be honest. I mean, to me, what we're seeing and what's happening is what matters to me. When you take a sample, it's that spot in time. So, yes, I want to start collecting more data, but as I said in my presentation, I'm willing, the door is open if somebody wants to collect that data on my farm. Come on up. I mean, I'm going to start, I know this year we're going to start hopefully collecting the carbon and that, but like I said, right now what we're seeing is, I mean, we're getting carbon 4 or 5 feet deep. That, to me, the visual, you know, last year we went to Terry Taylor's and he showed in 3 years they're taking 17 inches of topsoil and they're making 30 inches out of it just with annual ryegrass and that. I don't need a test to show me that stuff. So.
I guess on the Haney soil test, my score was 17.6. You know, and that was, you know, one of the fields that I've really intensively overlapped and really taken care of, intensively done cover crops on over the years. Another question.
How are you guys managing for insect pests? I scouted about 15,000 acres of corn and soybeans this summer, and some guys were cover cropping and some guys weren't. And particularly in fields that were maybe going in front of corn and they still had like annual rye or triticale, they seem to have a bigger problem with cutworms, rootworms, if they had livestock, wireworms. How are you guys managing for that?
Okay, the question was, how do we manage insect pressure with covers and intercropping?
To me, the precision covers is giving me a buffer. I'm not actually killing that rye until the corn is established in that. Plus, if you get a chance today, Jonathan Lundgren, he'll talk about his predator prey deal where you stick the mealworm. We did that in my field last summer when Clapperton was there. The longest any mealworm lasted was 10 minutes out in my field. It's gone. I mean, we've got active biology out there. You know, I use very limited insecticide, but you know, I'm still using traded seed in that too. So this year we're going to try to do some insect, you know, without the seed treatment. We're going to, you know, we had a pioneer plot there this year. We had 3 different seed treatments. First question I had is, what, you know, give me a naked seed. You know, let's see what naked seed would do on my field, because I think we're starting to see little rootworm reduction. Somebody's got to help. You know, I'm not a scientist. I'm a farmer. As you've seen, I like to build. This is just my. We're seeing some pretty cool stuff in the field.
Yeah, and yeah, with a diverse cover crop, we're seeing a lot more beneficials, you know, come around. So really try to reserve the insecticides and some of the treatments still in my tool bag, but let's hold back on them. Now, one of the things when we start really pushing forward and doing bigger rye, and one of the train wrecks that I've had is when I got bolder and bolder and tried to get the nitrogen management. I had a pop-up, I had a sideband, had a deep band, and also a broadcast, 4 kind of different applications on that corn crop. We still had some nitrogen immobilization once we got bigger rye. So I'm to where we need to terminate that rye way early. Then we also had one field that we had fall armyworm come in. Now there are some producers that are planting in rye that are going ahead and in their spray putting the insecticide in there. I'd rather wait and scout and do that. But we had one field that was severely damaged. The armyworms hit. The custom operator was going to be there the next day to take care of it. 3 days later he showed up. So it really expanded the problem. So we took a really bad yield hit. You know, I thought I was getting comfortable getting my carbon nitrogen, but you know, insects, you have to really scout if you're really pushing that envelope beyond. So now we're going backing up to what I know what works in that small vegetative state of the rye, which the carbon nitrogen ratio is really low, so it's not going to immobilize your nitrogen. And then you'll have less insect pests. But with having some of these others, multi-species and throwing in there, then it seems like there's other, the beneficials and the predatory insects. I've seen an increase, you know, in spiders and, you know, different things in my crop to help take care of that naturally. Yes.
Chris, talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of seeding beans into the fall planted rye versus the spring planted seeding beans into the spring planted real diverse cover crop.
Okay, he was asking about the pros and cons comparing fall cereal rye ahead of soybeans or else doing the spring cover crop. Time, you know, if you get it done in the fall, you know, if you get the rye done then. The pros of the spring seeded is getting diversity there. But then sometimes, you know, getting out there waiting. One year we were going to do it in March. Well, it didn't thaw out till, you know, 1st of April. So we put it in there, and that was some of that only grew for about 32 days. So it just gives you another option and to intermix that diversity into there. And I'm liking oats and barley, especially now in this economy, on some acres, and we're going to be doing some trials on that. And also, you know, comparing it to the rye to get some hard numbers on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brain around because we don't use these herbicides, so I'm trying to convert in my head to what is applicable to my system. And when you're talking about the rye, would it make sense to have something that winter killed, like oats, and then come back with oats in a diverse cover crop situation, and then maybe do some light tillage to make that, instead of the herbicide, to get some of that same effect? I guess I'm wondering what in your system you think is due to your no-till and what is due to your, you know, your cover cropping.
Okay. You're asking in our system, you know, why do the cereal rye and why not do something that winter kills?
Well, no, I guess I'm asking if the winter, if you're doing the rye and you don't have the option of killing it with an herbicide, then you're making it go to term and you're roller crimping it. So then that kind of negates any ability to put that diverse cover crop. So what do you think about replacing that rye with a fall winter kill crop and then coming back with a diverse?
Right. And I'm still thinking those thoughts of putting in, you know, a winter kill crop. And I think that's maybe where we're leaning towards, you know, going, you know, ahead of corn, you know, so you don't have that. And in your situation where you don't want to use that, or if your soils need to warm up a little better, you know, putting oats and barley in the fall. Because in the fall, oats and barley you'll get so much more growth than you will out of rye. Because it's trying to do, and it will go down to 18, 22 degrees before it finally freezes out. So no, that's a good option. And some guys are putting some rye with oats and barley. So then they don't have a real thick stand of rye, you know, going into the spring. So there's all sorts of, you know, whatever works for you. I mean, and looking at the charts, you know, there's a wide variety of options. So yeah, that's a great idea.
No,
on my side, it'd come back to that, you gotta learn to adapt what we're saying to your situation. I mean, I'd like to say you can do this and this and this, but I'm getting closer to, not, you know, no herbicide, but I'm a long ways from it. So can I give you an honest answer? No, but to me, the precision covers, that's kind of what's helped me get to that point. When I really started pushing the interseed cover crops, that has helped me get away from tillage actually, because I mean, I was strip tilling and all that. I don't have compaction anymore. We've got nutrient cycling, so why do I need a strip till anymore? So last summer, my strip till bar left, and you know, I'm committed. But
Yes, over here.
I just had a story about another kind of soil biological activity monitoring test. I know someone who hunts squirrels, and they buried a dead squirrel in their vegetable fields, and also in a prairie, and then also in a woodland. And they said that the one in the vegetable fields hardly broke down at all after, I think it was a couple of months. The one in the prairie basically dissolved, and the one in the woodland partially broke down.
Okay, yeah. She come up with another test, I guess we could call it.
that was the variation we did add to the soil grundies this year. We did go to extreme, and I did bury a pair in a prairie, in the woods, and you would be shocked how much slower them areas are than our cornfields. I mean, when you get a cornfield cooking, it's, you know, I showed you on that one slide there, the ground was actually bubbling. I've never seen that before. You know, everybody's like, oh, you took it right after rain. No, it was 3-4 days after the rain, so.
Yeah, that might be a good test for some people, but you know, the dead squirrel test, you know. So, you know. But
First thing I was going to ask, it wasn't the same squirrel every time, was it? But got one over here.
yes,
What were your varieties of cowpeas? The climbing one?
the climbing one is a black seeded one, and there's different names and stuff. You know, but you can talk to your seed supplier and stuff, and that, you know, each one has something different, but they're very similar along the lines. But the black seeded one, we tried some red rippers. He's asking about the varieties of the cowpeas, and the red rippers are a real short season, and they set seed. And so that was a negative for me because I'm also doing some non-GMO clear Highland soybeans after the corn crop. So then if I have some volunteers in there, you know, and, you know, sending them to my purveyor, you know, and they have these little red beans in along with these clear Highlands, that wouldn't go over very well. So we got to eliminate that. Now the iron and clay, if they're a longer season one, so we haven't set seed with those.
Because those would be good for silage, corn silage.
Yeah.
The climbing ones.
Yeah, the climbing ones and stuff like that, if you have the multi-row head and stuff like that, the Kemper heads and stuff like that, yeah, it would be great. Then you could go with a little drier material on your corn. You know, the way these corn varieties reach maturity, and the chopper is not going to be there right on that time when it's perfect, but adding that would give you some buffer on your moisture content. So. What?
They were the black seeded ones.
The black seeded ones are the very aggressive ones, you know, that will really take over. So recommend for deer plots or for grazing or chopping silage. Yes.
Last one.
Last question. Right up front.
Chris, you mentioned in passing, one of your associates was thinking about strip grazing.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about that? What animals and when?
He wanted to strip. The question is, you know, asking about the strip grazing, you know, what I mentioned. Anyway, that sparked his idea. And he was going to strip graze some feeder calves as the corn matures and stuff, and then as it puts grain on, then it's kind of the ration changes on what a finishing ration would be. So a lot of these are mob grazing, stripping, you know, with a poly wire, and, you know, only letting them have so much access to so much land at a time. So he was like, how could he do that? And I've seen most guys have a cornfield grazing corn, and then they run the corn down to put their poly line through. So it's like, well, if you're planting this, leave that one row out, replace that one row, you know, and some of the newer planters, maybe you can't do that. You'd have to go to the old individual box planter, you know, to do something like that. But if that's your goal, you know, came up with an idea where we had this gap in the corn to where he could, and other species could grow there, so he had a total mix, and it just sparked his idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's thank Loran and Chris for the great